This is Governor Bobber. I like good day, doctors.
George Allen here. Good day, doctors.
Hey, this is Governor Chris Christie from New Jersey. Good day, doctors.
Go! You're watching Dr. Politics.
Good Wednesday evening, everyone. You are watching Direct Line. Tonight, our special guest is Mike Richman, journalist and author of George Allen, A Football Life. And our hosts tonight are Mark Unkefer and Jackie Saxton. Take it away, guys.
You had me really excited that it was Friday for a second.
So I want to know if we're going to get a better check for co-hosting as a result of being on Dr. Politics as opposed to Direct Line. What do you think, Jackie?
We get paid? You get paid?
I got the W-2 just the other day.
Dang, man. That wage gap.
Anyway, welcome to Direct Line. And Mike, we're really glad to have you on. And as we like to do, we like to feature books. And this is a little bit, we're stretching, as they say. We're stretching kind of our muscles, our literary muscles. You've done a great book about George Allen, and our good friend and frequent guest on Direct Line, Senator and Governor George Allen, has really recommended this book. But why did you decide to start it to begin with?
Sure. First, great to be on your show. Very excited about it. I grew up with the George Allen coached Redskins. First of all, I was 10 years old when he came to Washington in 1971. He was already a well-established coach, one of the elite coaches in the league. But he really turned this Redskins team around. In 1971, he brought them to their first playoff appearance in a quarter century. And he just, the whole town exploded with excitement, and everybody was rallying around the Redskins, including myself. Became a true Redskins fan and really started following the Redskins in earnest. And then I later became a journalist in my career. I actually developed a strong interest in writing as a kid, and I went to a lot of museums in the D.C. area, a lot of history museums, and gained a tremendous interest in history as well. So I packaged all those interests and subjects together and pursued journalism as a career, and then embarked on literary projects and had the Redskins Encyclopedia in 2007, the Washington Redskins Football Vault in 2010, Joe Gibbs, an Enduring Legacy in 2015. So what I think is probably the final piece to my Redskins literary puzzle was George Allen, A Football Life. I really think that, I know definitely I was the person to write the definitive biography on him, and I did so. I embarked on the project. The Allen family was a tremendous help to me. You mentioned George Allen, the senator, his eldest son. He was great. Bruce Allen, former team executive for the Redskins, Jennifer Allen, his daughter, and Greg Allen, another of his 4 kids. They were all great. And so here we are, George Allen, Football Life. It hit the shelves recently, and I'm very excited about it.
So I think it's safe to say that you're a Redskins fan.
That is a safe conclusion, yes.
So what was your whole take on the name change? I know it shook up the DC area when it happened. So not only yours, but George Allen's as well.
Sure. Well, I was, very disappointed with the name change, and but I also looked at the counter argument. I went back in history. I didn't just say that, hey, I'm opposed to the name change. I went and looked back in history, and also current happenings in terms of the polls and things like that. The 2 major polls that I knew of, AP and Washington Post, both concluded the same thing, that 90% of Native Americans were not opposed to a name change. I also went back in history and looked at the creation of the name Redskins, the reasons behind it, and that I also knew that in all of my research, I had never found anything that told me that there was any racist intent behind the creation of that name. George Preston Marshall, who was the original owner of the team, he originally had them named the Braves. They were the Braves in their first season in Boston in 1932. Then he renamed them the Redskins in 1933. He wanted to develop a kinship with the Boston Red Sox because his football team started playing in Fenway Park, home of the Red Sox. And he also wanted to maintain that Native American theme that he had with the Braves. On top of that, Marshall had a major fascination with Native Americans, and he was very sympathetic, in particular, toward the Native American cause. He really admired a 1929 silent movie called Redskin, which was very sympathetic toward the plight of Native Americans. So in all of my research, I never found any racist intent in terms of the creation of the name. Now, on top of all that, a Native American was behind the creation of the helmet logo that sits right behind me, that was formed in 1972. Walter Blackie Wetzel, he was chair of Blackfeet Nation in Montana, and he approached the Redskins prior to the 1972 season, in particular George Allen, who was the Redskins coach at the time. And he said to Allen, listen, I don't like the R in the Redskins helmet. I think it's lame. I like something, representing a proud-looking Native American chief. And that's what he came up with. Allen told him to go back and create something, give me a composite, what you would really like as the logo. And he came back with a image of Chief Two Guns White Calf, who was the actual image on the Buffalo nickel, the proud-looking Native American chief. And that's what ended up on the helmet. So when you factor that in as well, I asked myself, well, what would influence a Native American to approach the Redskins if he thought the Redskins the name was racist itself? And in fact, Wetzel was quoted by the Washington Post in 2002 as saying it's a minority of Native Americans that were really pushing for the name change. The ultra majority of Native Americans do not find it offensive. They're very proud of the name. It represents, the warrior spirit, which is what they really like. And in fact, today there's a group called the Native American Guardians Association that's leading the charge for the team to return to the name Redskins. I believe they have filed some type of a lawsuit for the team to reclaim the name Redskins.
It's like what they did with the Land O'Lakes butter. It's like, this wasn't offending anybody. And instead of actually like having some representation for Native Americans, you're just taking them out of the picture altogether, which to me is more racist.
Well, I personally, if I felt something was racist, if I knew that with all of the, the facts that I've come across, if I hadn't come across any of that, if I, it was just me saying, well, I've been a Redskins fan all these years. And but if that's the only reason that I was defending the name Redskins, but there was real evidence that it was a racist name, then I would support a name change, of course. But the evidence is piled up that, to me, it really is a minority of Native Americans that feel it's offensive. The two major polls that have been done, like I said, the Associated Press and Washington Post have both concluded 90% of Native Americans do not find it offensive. So it's kind of like, where do we draw the line, not only about this subject, but other subjects in society where it's a minority, and then we go ahead and make changes. Right? It's a minority that's offended, and then we act on that and make changes.
Mm-hmm. So let's turn to George Allen, and he is obviously a figure of another era. I guess one of the places that you suggest in your book that is sort of formative to his outlook was the fact that he was a product of the Depression. And as we get farther away from that, why don't you elaborate on how that shaped him?
Sure. He grew up exactly at that time during the Great Depression, and that really, I think, shaped the characteristics that he showed later in life in terms of his, number one, his work ethic, because he was the primary breadwinner in the household for several years. His father was injured on the factory line. His mother really didn't work. So he would, he had all these different odd jobs that, he was bringing in whatever money he could in the household. And so he, that in large part shaped the tremendous work ethic that he had throughout his life. He was really one of the first 24/7 workaholic head coaches in the NFL. Secondly, he developed a tremendous love for sports as a kid. I mean, he played a variety of sports, everything from ice hockey, basketball, track. He was actually a track star in high school, track, basketball, and football. Those were his three. He was a three-sport athlete in high school, and he was very big in intramural sports in college as well. But he eventually determined that he didn't have the athletic ability to go beyond really anything beyond anything beyond high school. But he developed an interest in coaching. He said, "Hey, I want to give coaching a shot," which was really, a reach at that time in the Great Depression. I mean, you would think that somebody would choose something more practical, like law or medicine or whatever that they wanted to pursue. He wanted to be a coach, and sure enough, he eventually realized that dream. So the workaholic, his love for sports, those are two of his major characteristics that really took form during the Great Depression.
So who was his mentor, his top mentor in the coaching world? Because as you said, he didn't go for the easy path. He definitely picked something that's a little bit more niche to get into.
Right. His top mentor was George Halas, the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Allen became part of the Chicago Bears staff in 1959. Halas hired him as what was then called the head talent scout, which would today be the general manager for a team. He hired him as the head talent scout and then promoted him to defensive coordinator in 1963. But Halas was Allen's top mentor. He learned, he picked up on Halas's tremendous work ethic as well. He also learned, he actually learned the good and the bad from Halas. One of the things that was quite suspect is Halas was known as one of the spies in the league, spying on other teams. Allen picked up on that as well. He became the top man for espionage in the NFL. So, but he really he learned a lot from George Halas. And then later, actually, the two had a very acrimonious parting in 1965. Allen wanted to leave as an assistant from the Bears and become a head coach in the NFL. He was offered a head coaching position with the Los Angeles Rams, and Halas actually sued him. There was some proprietary information that Halas felt that Allen had, and it was actually listed in the contract that way, that Allen had this access to secretive information of the Bears. So Halas sued him, and really Halas was just trying to prove a point, and which he did. The judge ruled for Halas, saying that this information actually did exist in Allen's contract, but Halas said, you're free to go and coach wherever you want now. I've won the case on principle.
So tell us, how did you've talked about his work ethic, but so what made him different as a coach from other coaches?
Well, number one, he was a pioneer in the NFL. He really, really focused on defense and special teams, much more so than his coaching peers. Defense, he introduced schemes in the NFL, blitz packages, the 5 and 6 man defensive backs. He introduced all of that. And special teams, he was one of the first coaches in the league, probably maybe the first, to put so much emphasis on special teams in practice. I mean, he would devote time in his practices to running different special teams plays and also during games he would want his special teams introduced prior to the games. He really wanted them to feel special. He also hired Dick Vermeil as one of the first true special teams coaches in the NFL in 1969. When Allen coached the Rams, the Eagles hired Marv Levy the same year in 1969 as their special teams coach. So, that's really, those are two major reasons why he was so different from his other coaches. That emphasis on defensive special teams, and also he put so much emphasis on signing veteran players. I mean, he really felt he trusted veteran players a lot more. He wanted that experience on his rosters. He felt that rookies were going to, or less experienced players were going to make those mental mistakes that he wouldn't tolerate. So he trusted veterans a lot more than most of his coaching peers.
So he didn't just coach for the Redskins, he also did a stint with the LA Rams. So what was the difference between those times when he was coaching? Did anything change? Was he similar in his style?
I think he was basically the same. His approach on the field. He was a defensive oriented coach. He put so much emphasis on defense, and he did the same thing with the Redskins. I should say he started with the Rams in 1966. He coached the Rams from 1966 through 1975 seasons in total, and then he coached the Redskins for 7 seasons, 1971 through 1977. But his approach was pretty much the same in terms of emphasizing veteran players. His rosters were stocked with veterans, and emphasis on defense and special teams. Those were his priorities as coach. Also, he had antagonistic, in another similarity, he had antagonistic relationships with both of his head coaches. One, Dan Reeves in L.A. I'm sorry, both of his owners, Dan Reeves in L.A. and Edward Bennett Williams in Washington. He had antagonistic relationships with both. In fact, Reeves fired him twice, once after the 1968 season. He then rehired him after the Rams players staged a press conference saying that we want our coach back or we're going to quit. Reeves rehired him. He then fired him again after the 1970 season, at which time the Redskins hired him to coach in D.C. And then he was let go by the Redskins after the 77 season.
So tell me a little bit. In Washington, he became kind of a phenomenon. How long did that take? Was that a function of winning, or how do you think he stepped into the Washington area?
Well, I think it's because he won so fast. I mean, he took the Redskins in 1971 to their first playoff season since 1945, since the Sammy Baugh days. So that was a major reason. I mean, it basically was like the awakening of a sleeping giant. I mean, case in point, after the Redskins won their first 3 games, after the third win over the Dallas Cowboys, 10,000 fans stormed Dulles Airport. They drove down the Dulles Toll Road to Dulles Airport to greet the team as it was returning from Dallas. So the pilot actually was notified that these fans were going to swarm the tarmac, and the pilot actually had to park the plane away from all of that. So, to give the plane some space there. But many of the fans actually did make their way onto the tarmac. And by the way, Dulles Airport, it was very close to where the first Redskin Park was built in 1971, which was a George Allen creation. And actually which was in Chantilly, Virginia. That area was so remote at the time, and was basically like horse country. But that's where the first Redskin Park was built.
I just want to say for our listeners that we don't encourage people who are not entitled to, don't have security, to drive on the field out at Dulles Airport.
Well, I was going to say, and then all those people moved to Philadelphia and are your current day Eagles fans. That sounds like something they would do.
Of course, anything like that wouldn't exist today.
Yes.
I mean, with today's security, presumably. But
right.
But anyway, that's an example of how he turned the whole town around, and he became a phenomenon at that point. Then he padded that in 1972. He took the Redskins to their first Super Bowl appearance ever, Super Bowl VII. It was an 11-3 regular season. Then they won their 2 playoff games. They beat the Green Bay Packers in the first round, and the Dallas Cowboys 26-3 on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1972. Yours truly was at both of those playoff games, and my father took me to both of those. Then the following week, the Redskins lost in Super Bowl VII to the Miami Dolphins 14-7. And that was the year the Dolphins finished 17-0. So to answer your question, Allen was very much a phenomenon in the DC area at the time. After that season, though, he went to the playoffs 3 more times in DC, but he never took the team past the first round of the playoffs.
So one of the top fans that he attracted during that period in Washington was Richard Nixon, and it was he very much embraced the Redskins while he was president. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Right. Well, the first thing I'll say about that is they didn't meet when Allen came to D.C. in 1971. Nixon, obviously, he was in his 3rd year in the White House. They met in the early 50s. Allen at the time was the head coach at Whittier College in the Los Angeles area, and that was Nixon's alma mater. This is just by coincidence. So, at an NCAA banquet that Nixon was at, and that Allen was at, and Nixon was invited to go to the banquet. So Nixon approached Allen, and Nixon wanted to meet the coach of his alma mater. So the two engaged in a conversation about football. Nixon was very astute about football, and it was a tremendous interest of his. He knew a lot about sports, but I think football was his greatest interest in sports. And of any president in the White House, I think nobody was more astute about sports than Richard Nixon. And he knew so much about football. But anyway, he wanted to meet George Allen at that banquet, so they became friends there, and then they continued the friendship in the ensuing years. In fact, Nixon wrote him a letter after Allen was fired the first time by Dan Reeves, like I explained. And also, Allen, and I uncovered this at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where the Allen archives are housed. Allen wrote Nixon a letter in, I guess it was in May of 1970, right after Nixon decided to bomb Cambodia. And Allen said, "Oh, just don't worry about what the media is saying. Just you do what you think is right." So, they were
probably music to Nixon's ears.
What's that?
That was probably music to Nixon's ears.
Right. As we know, Nixon did not admire the media that much, as Allen was not a tremendous fan of the media either. That was a huge similarity between the two. Another similarity is that they both had a great work ethic. I mean, they were both industrious people, and they came from tough upbringings too. I mean, Allen during the Great Depression, and Nixon, I think his family's ranch in Yorba Linda, California. They were struggling in the 1920s financially, so they both grew up, during tough times. So, but they persisted, and they made tremendous successes out of themselves. I mean, Allen really admired the fact that Nixon made one of the greatest comebacks, if not the greatest comeback in U.S. political history. After losing the governorship in 1962, I mean, everybody thought he was done, and even he said it. Right. You've probably seen the last of Dick Nixon or whatever, but he came back and won the presidency. But Allen really admired that, and that is quoted in the book. So, yeah.
And Richard Nixon's not the only president that George Allen was friendly with, right?
No, he became good friends with Ronald Reagan as well. In 1966, Allen's first year coaching the Los Angeles Rams, Reagan came to a Rams practice, and it was right before the gubernatorial vote in 1966, where Reagan beat, I guess it was Pat Brown's.
Right.
Yeah, it was Pat Brown. Yeah. So I was thinking Jerry Brown, but that's his father. But yeah, so Reagan came there right before the election, and he gave the team a pep talk. I think the Rams had lost like 3 straight games. He gave them a pep talk. He recited the line from Knute Rockne All-American, like win one for the Gipper. that was a large part of his pep talk. So anyway, those two remained in contact.
So what you're saying, you're breaking this. This is something I think. So at some point, an NFL game actually turned on a pep talk from Reagan saying, "Win it for the Gipper."
Well, in Knute Rockne All-American, the movie.
Yes.
That was Reagan's line.
That was Reagan's line. Yeah, right.
So Reagan used that line, that phrase, when he visited the Rams practice. Mm-hmm. It was to inspire them in a way, because they had lost 3 straight games. So he used that line from Knute Rockne All-American. But Reagan and Allen stayed in contact, and in fact, when Allen was out of coaching in 1980, he campaigned for Reagan. He led a bus tour up the Hudson to Albany, and so he campaigned for Reagan in 1980. His first bid for the presidency, or I guess
second. Yeah,
he tried in 76. But anyway, so and also in 81, Reagan, after his election, he appointed Allen to chair the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, a role which Allen held for about 7 years through the 1980s. So, and Allen was the perfect person to lead that council, because I mean, he was an exercise fanatic. I mean, he really he ran a lot. He was big in calisthenics. He hit the punching bag. I mean, he was in tremendous shape at this stage of his life, and so yeah, he was the perfect person to lead that. But Reagan had appointed him to that role. So
now, among Republican presidents, we know that Bush 41 and 43 were, shall we say, more baseball fans, or more oriented toward baseball. But there's actually a Trump connection that was kind of interesting to talk about. So can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Well, George Allen and Donald Trump first met through the United States Football League. Allen came to the USFL in 1983 as the head coach of the Chicago Blitz. This is USFL was just in its first season, inaugural season. So Allen was the head coach of the Chicago Blitz. He also held a minority ownership of that team. And so he came to know Trump because Trump hosted meetings of the USFL at Trump Tower. So that's how he first came to know Donald Trump. And Trump was actually an owner in the NFL at first in 1983, and then he dropped out. But he did become a true owner in 1984. He came to own the New Jersey Generals in the USFL. So Allen was still in the USFL at that time. The Chicago Blitz swapped franchises with the Arizona Wranglers. So Allen became the head coach of the Wranglers. So and Trump was the owner of the New Jersey Generals. So the two continued to know each other through the USFL. Then when Allen left the USFL after the '84 season, he and Trump stayed in touch. Trump invited him to Mar-a-Lago, which he had purchased in 1985. Allen went down there with his wife, Etty. And also, when Allen was chairing the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, Trump was a big proponent of what he was doing. Allen was very concerned about kids and adults becoming obese in the United States. And he was trying to build a national fitness center in the Los Angeles area. Trump was he fully endorsed that. So that's how those two knew each other.
So, do you think that George Allen's strong ties to several prominent Republican politicians had any impact on his son, who then went on to be a senator and a governor?
I would say in a way. I actually, I never asked him that question, never asked the son that question, but I would have to think that it played some role in that. But at the same time, I would say I did ask George Allen, the eldest son. I asked him, so how political did your father really get? And he defined it as apolitical. He wasn't really, he didn't have time to become involved in politics so much. I mean, even in 1972, when Nixon was running for president the second time, he didn't really campaign for him at all. He signed a poster that many other NFL coaches did, and many NFL players did as well, endorsing Nixon for president, but he never went out campaigning for him. His first real campaigning for president was that bus tour that I explained that he led for Ronald Reagan in 1980. But from what George Felix Allen described, he was basically apolitical.
So once he left coaching, I guess it was the Redskins were his last head coaching before the U.S. Football League. He never returned as a coach to the NFL, despite his success while he had been with the Redskins. Why was that? Any thoughts about?
Sure. Well, the first part of the answer is that he had those antagonistic relationships with the two owners, Dan Reeves in Los Angeles, Edward Bennett Williams in D.C. And when he left Washington, he badmouthed Williams. He called him in. He didn't like the way Williams had handled the contractual situation. Even though Williams had offered him a contract extension, there was no opportunity for Allen to buy into the team, which he really wanted to do. He had that opportunity in 1971. He never exercised it, but Williams never offered him the opportunity to buy into the team. Allen was very upset about that. So he called Williams a cold-blooded fish, among other things that were published in the DC newspapers. And so Allen was looked at as a cancer, basically, by other owners in the league. And he did have a coaching opportunity right after that. He coached the Rams in 1978. After leaving the Redskins in 77, he was hired by Rams owner Carroll Rosenblum, coached the Rams, and in a really ridiculous situation, he was fired after 2 exhibition games by the Rams in 1978. He never coached again in the NFL after that. But you factor in all of those details, the relationships that he had with the two owners and what he said about Williams, and also his reliance on veteran players too. The league was basically changing at the time to a much greater reliance on younger players, a much greater emphasis on the draft. And also, Allen wanted full control of the team, which he had in DC. He was both the general manager and the head coach of the team. And the league was basically veering away from that at the time. They were hiring a true general manager separate from the coach. Allen wanted both of those roles in whatever coaching gig that he had.
So now his very last season coaching was in 1990 at Long Beach State. So tell me about that season.
Sure. Well, from the time he left the USFL after the 1984 season, he was totally out of coaching. Like I explained, he was chair of the President's Council, but he had this tremendous itch to get back into coaching. And in fact, there were a number of people that influenced him. One of which was the actor Dabney Coleman. Allen became good friends with Coleman in the Los Angeles area. They had dinner a few times. So Coleman saw, they would have these conversations over dinner, and Coleman saw that Allen really, really wanted to coach. And so Coleman said, "You need to get back into it. That's your first love. Take a coaching opportunity, whatever comes along." So Allen took one of the lowliest college coaching positions, Long Beach State. It was a really major struggling program. They hadn't won in 4 or 5 seasons. They were about to disband the program, actually, for financial reasons, but they retained it for the 1990 season, and they hired George Allen to try and get the program back on its feet. And in fact, he finished with a 6-5 record that year, their first winning season in several seasons. And the players really admired him. Everyone was looking forward to him coming back and coaching the following season, including the school administration. But he passed away about a month after the season ending, which is a major surprise, including to the family, because like I explained earlier, he was in such tremendous physical shape. I mean, he was, even at the age of 73, I mean, he was running the hills in the Los Angeles area. I mean, he was doing all these calisthenics, and even the younger players, the players in their 20s at Long Beach State, they were looking at this and they were saying, "God, if our head coach is doing this and he's in his 70s, we should be doing it as well." So he inspired them that way.
So where can people find the book? And, I know you have an event coming up this weekend. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. The book is available through my website, myrichmanjournalist.com. That's if you want an author autograph copy, myrichmanjournalist.com. I'm also having a book signing this Sunday at Barnes & Noble in Tyson's Corner Mall. Starts at 1 o'clock. Senator George Allen will be there signing books with me. That will be a really fun afternoon. Hoping for a great turnout there. We're going to the senator and I will give a talk about the book, and then we'll sign after. We'll do a Q&A after that, and then we'll sign books right after that. And the signing precedes the AFC and NFC championship games, so football fever will be sky high that day.
People will be able to talk about the games doing that. And of course, if you're coming to Maryland, Jackie, what restaurant would you recommend to Mike?
I really like Masoni's. If you happen to be in the around Baltimore area, in Nottingham, Masoni's is great. And
isn't it incredible how Dwight was able to get that crawler up so quickly?
He's so good.
It's just it's like a mind meld with us. That he's able.
So Jackie, I'll take you up on that. Masoni's will be my next stop for a restaurant.
Yeah, right. Next time we're all together, we'll go and get some. I'm sure they have pizza Dwight's there already. So
you've had so many projects in sports. Now you kind of described the Allen book as a capstone, but do you have thoughts about another book down the road? I
have had thoughts. Yes, I'm not ready to embark on anything just yet. I want to see this George Allen book through, but I do have thoughts, and I do hold a full-time job as well. I work in communications at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. So I don't want to embark on anything just yet. I don't know if it's going to be sports related or could be history, some military history. I'm very big on that subject. So I've written a lot of articles about World War II history, about the history of journalism as well. The Washington Post used to have a section called Horizon. I don't know if you two recall, but that was very big on history. It was in the 1990s, they had that section. I wrote in 1998, I wrote about the 100-year history of the Spanish-American War. So military history is a very big interest of mine.
So we'll look forward to something when that comes up.
Definitely. I don't know, Mark, what's going on locally? You have any events you want to plug for the party?
Well, next week, the club will be having a pizza and politics. We are very pleased to have Kate Sullivan, who's been working on voter integrity issues. And she is the named plaintiff in a lawsuit against the State Board of Elections on some of the regulations that they have recently installed. And she's gotten she's been involved with a legal advocacy group that is very effective. It has had won a number of cases. This is on challenging regulation that prohibits voters from using the voter rolls to check to see whether or not the voter rolls are accurate, which is obviously an important tool to determine whether or not people are on or not that shouldn't be on. And so she and their lawyers are extremely confident that they will prevail in turning down this regulation, but that has recently been launched, and so she'll be talking about that. And she has also been doing some research in some other areas, some very refined data mining about the quality of the voter rolls. And she's found people who are registered from abandoned buildings, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And even more alarming, voters who, when queried, say, I never voted, despite the fact that the rolls show that they did, which obviously raises a lot of questions. So we're looking forward to doing that. That is up in Olney. It starts at 6:30, and it is Mama
Lucia.
Mama Lucia's. I was really going to do something else. Mama Lucia. It's like I'm on autopilot when I drive up there. But Mama Lucia's, and at 6:30. And if you're a member, it's only $10. If you're not a member, it costs you $20.
I'm still wrapping my head around the fact that it's already the first week of February. That's insane.
You know, it's funny. I was talking to Kate about this lawsuit earlier this week, and she was referencing the fact that it was next week, February 1st. And I said, that can't be true. And obviously I looked at the calendar, and it very much is a week from tomorrow.
Time flies.
And the Young Republicans, what are they up to?
Well, we had a great happy hour last night, the first of the legislative session that we're doing. We're going to be doing another one that the Anne Arundel YRs are hosting on February 22nd. My sources tell me it's going to be at Acme, which also I'm told is a lot of fun. So definitely come out to that and support. It's open to everybody. I know Mike was asking that earlier. Young Republicans and those who are young Republicans at heart and mind. And yeah, we're looking at really taking a more active role in the legislative process. So we have a lot of fun stuff in store for that. And stay tuned for more details on our convention this year and our crab feast, which will be the next two events coming up for us, major events. But
Sounds good. Sounds delicious.
I know all about Mama Lucia's, by the way. Great restaurant.
Great. Their garlic bread is everything.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I certainly learned a lot as somebody who doesn't watch a lot of sports. So thanks so much for coming on. And Mark, as usual, thank you for hosting with me. And we will see you all next week.
Great.
Thank you, Jackie and Mark. Appreciate it.